Kia ora, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm sitting here with my friend,
Sophia.
and we hope you enjoy this episode. We are in, and just as I promised you before, chapter 24 podcast. What is it?
This is my podcast. I started it about November last year, literally on my 24th birthday. Hence the name, chapter 24. And I guess it's like a podcast that kind of encapsulates, I guess, the different lessons or journeys that I've been on in my 24 years of this awesome life.
Mm-hmm.
So in my line of work, I have heaps of conversations. Well, I do mental health support, pastoral care, academic support for students here at the university. And so essentially I found that I was having lots of conversations with individual people about the same kind of issues, and I think there's like a stigma around talking about these different lessons, feeling super uncomfortable, feeling like you're falling behind in like the society timeline that we're kind of set as young teenagers or adults, for example. And so I thought, why not just make it into something? And I personally love listening to podcasts, and I also talk a lot, so I was like, wow, this is the perfect opportunity to just kind of sit there and record and like talk about things that I have learnt or have learnt through other people. So I did probably a more hands-on role last year where people who you're working with force you to actually reflect on where you're at with different things in your life because of their lessons. Sure. And so that kind of stuff, I healed a lot from it, but I also learnt so much, and I want to share that with other people too, because I think even if they listen to the podcast, then maybe they will become aware of certain things as well. Yeah, that was kind of what I was going for. It's still like a work in progress. Every episode is honestly different, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly what vibe or how I want to kind of come into it and expand it a little bit more. Yeah. But it's super fun to do, and I would encourage anyone who is even thinking about it to try.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that was something that I've told many people who come on, like if they're a really good speaker and they said, but there's too many podcasts, and I was like, but there is no one who has your experience.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And so we'll just go back to when you do start one. So so I've spoken about it a few times, but then it's interesting hearing other people starting one as well, because you've done majority or all solo so far. And like you sound crazy when you try to set up that first one, right? Sure. So for you, what's going through your mind, and then when you do it, and then like the whole process for you to get through that?
Yeah. So I think. Oh, I'm on this journey of like learning a lot about technology. So that was my first barrier, because I am so technologically challenged, like literally, and I don't have a lot of the equipment. And to be honest, you don't need anything fancy to start off with anyway, which is really, really cool. Literally, all the episodes so far are just me sitting on the floor in my little apartment with this like $30 mic that I bought from the warehouse connected to GarageBand, and that's all I use. And GarageBand is something that I learned how to use when I was like year 3 or 4. Sure. And honestly, it's just like you stop the recording, you start the recording, you like delete certain clips and stuff like that. Yep. And that's how I started. I think what's going through my mind though is like, I'm happy to record these things, but you're so scared of what people are going to think about you. Like I was so nervous, and even like when I released the first episode, I made the mistake, and I know you and I have talked about this before, I listened to it on repeat, and you're so critical of yourself. It's crazy. And then sometimes you listen to your own voice and you're like, ooh, I sound so gross. Is that what people think of? Like, is that what I sound like to other people? And all that kind of stuff. But in all honesty, like when you start off, I had really thought about exactly what I wanted to get out of this podcast, or where I wanted to go initially with it. And when you kind of have like an understanding and like a foundation of your why, I guess you're doing something, it makes it so much easier, because you come back to it and you're like, at the end of the day, this is what I'm doing it for. Some people might like it, some people might not like it, and sometimes you've just got to accept it for what it is. And so when it was out, it got actually heaps of good feedback. Like I really was appreciative of the people that wrote back and like, hey, thank you so much. And honestly, since then, the episodes have kind of been some better than others, but like that's just the reality of making something like this. Sometimes life throws shit at you, and you've got to kind of adapt it. And obviously, no one's forcing me to do a podcast, so it takes a lot of motivation to actually make something like this. Yeah. And then some episodes I'm more proud of than not, but at the end of the day, I always come back to the essence of the podcast itself is things that I have learned / conversations I wish I could have had at a younger age. So it's like little things that I call her Little Soph, would have liked to hear.
Yep.
And so if people like those messages, that's cool. If they don't have to listen. And it's just about having a little bit of confidence in yourself. And yeah, so once I got it out there, I got a lot of good feedback, and that's quite motivating in itself. But to keep going forward, I know that I'm going to have to back myself, which is really cool. And so it teaches you so much about yourself as well, even outside of the podcast, because you're forcing yourself to reflect on things, and you're like, wow, I actually think that now, rather back in the day I remember thinking this. And so it's cool to be able to talk about growth and the journey, and encourage other people to think about different things too. Like my latest episode is on your inner child, which I think is really cool, and a lot of people weren't exactly aware of what that was / why they were reacting in some ways, and now they started looking into it a bit more, and like they're understanding a lot more about themselves, and which honestly, making a podcast and releasing an episode is like the smallest thing that I can contribute to their life, but they're going to just like learn invaluable lessons from it, which is really cool.
That's cool. Yeah, and I've been really proud of your growth, like just in general. So I've known you, we've actually known each other for a while now,
like
and we've had
so.
really cool conversations, just like in and out of each other's lives over that time, and then come back, and it's like there was no time apart, but we'd learnt so much in that time, and then we were able to share it again, and it's been cool that it's been like that. But also watching your growth, and then just remembering, like there were some times when you were talking in the different episodes, and I remember you telling me that, and I'm like, oh, it's like, so then like I also feel like I'm listening, or like you're talking to me. And I think that's something that people really like about solos. And when you're putting it out there, you know, because you probably get this a lot as well, and I'm interested to hear, when you put the stuff out there, there's the first one, which is people like, I didn't know that you were going through that, because you look so strong. And then the second one is just like, I feel like you're talking to me. Yeah. Do you get that a lot?
Yeah. I get, I don't know, it's weird when people say, oh my gosh, I love your voice. Like, it's like we're sitting there and having conversation. Like, a lot of the people that I've worked with message me, and they're like, oh my gosh, I just feel like if I close my eyes, I can picture us in the dining room or out in a cafe, and we're actually talking about things, which I really like, because I hate being talked at. You know, with some podcasts, and I don't want to shit on other people's podcasts, but some podcasts, they talk at you, and it's like a little bit condescending, and I don't like that. I like to have conversations that are real, I guess, and like encompassing of like people's energy and people's presence and stuff like that too. So yeah, no, it's something that's really interesting. Yeah,
and it takes you, I mean, you do become quite reflective, but I do remember in those earlier years when we started, I would look at everything and I'd be like, could I talk about that? Like, I did have that for a while. Like, do you get that as well? Like, you are reflecting, like you're like, yes, I'm reflecting on stuff, but you're like, that would be good for the podcast. And you're just like, damn it, am I turning my life into like just doing things to record?
Often when I'm running, sometimes when you're exercising, you probably find this as well, you get like the best breakthroughs and thoughts. It's crazy. And I'll be running and I'll be like 10 kilometers from home, but oh my gosh, I have to stop this and I have to go home and I have to write this down. And you feel so motivated, but then I think I probably haven't capitalized on that enough, and so sometimes when I do need to record an episode, I don't have that same inspiration. So it's trying to figure out when to record and when not to record and how to go about it, because there's no manual that teaches you or tells you how to make a podcast. You're kind of figuring it out for yourself.
For sure.
But yes, no, absolutely.
That happens quite a bit. And now something you did just touch on there, and I'm sure we'll bring the podcast like in, because a lot of it is to do with your combination of learnings over time. The running aspect of things. Now, you're one of those nutters who, like, you know, started a little bit, like really enjoyed running a lot, and then you just decided to sign up for a whole bunch of things. Could you see, like, when was the first event that you were just like, what in the heck am I doing? Like, when was the first one? How long was it? And what was it? And then you just completed one, like, not too long ago. Your journey in that sport, I guess you could call it, from the first one to now.
Yeah, so I was always quite an active person. Like at high school, I played team sports and stuff. Not a runner, oh my gosh. But then when I came to university, I played like a little bit of football and stuff. But predominantly your team sport just drops off. Like it's super easy. Everything that you did at high school just falls off the bandwagon. And you come first year and it's all... I don't want to say all about drinking and stuff, but your social landscape changes, your
Very
behavior
social.
changes, and your priorities change, I guess. And my first semester when I was down here, I didn't do anything at all apart from play a little bit of football. And then in the second semester, I just saw the Dunedin Marathon signs all over the concrete. You know how it's like a big point of advertising here. They just write stuff all over the university campus and pavements and stuff. And so my first event I signed up for was a quarter marathon.
Right.
Which was, at that time, it was a 12.7 kilometre run. And I had not run in my life like any of these races. I think I came like second in like year 6 cross country or something, and then that was it. I was done. But yeah, so I signed up. That was my first race, which was really, really cool and really challenging. And often when you start running, you get what they call a runner's high, and it's something that you become slightly addicted to in a positive way, obviously, because you're doing productive things. And I loved it. And then the next year, I just signed up for a half marathon, and that one was a hard one because I probably didn't train enough, but you learn so much like about yourself throughout this process. And then I wanted to do the full marathon in 2019, but didn't get around to it. But 2020, because of lockdown and stuff, I ended up running heaps. Yeah. And so I ran my first marathon 2020 in November. It was Queenstown Marathon. Yep. Yeah. Loved it. It was like the coolest thing I'd ever done, and it's such a sense of accomplishment when you cross that finish line, because it's not just like the race, the 4 hours that you run for. It's like the 6 to 8 months prior to that you learn and grow, and you're actually putting in the hard yards. Yeah. And that kind of started it. So then the year after, I did the Hawke's Bay Marathon, and then the year after that, so last year, I did the Dunedin Marathon, which was my best one, and then I also completed in December last year a half Ironman. Yes. Yeah, so that's what they call an Ironman 70.3, and for those of you who don't know what that is, basically you swim, bike and run, so it's a form of triathlon. You swim about 1.9 kilometres, you bike 90 kilometres, and then you finish with a half marathon run, which is 21.1 kilometres. And when I told people I was doing it, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is so fun. And they're like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And honestly, it was probably one of the hardest things I've done, but what it has done for my mental health and my confidence, like how I perceive myself, has been incredible, because I did that race in 6.5 hours non-stop. And so if I'm ever struggling in like a 1 hour like group fitness class, I'd be like, come on, Soph, you could do 6.5 of these. Like, you have potential, and it's awesome to know what your capacity is. And even then, it was really cool because I did it with some friends from around the country, and we all met there. Yeah. And so it's fantastic because it developed our friendship as well. For sure. Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting you saying like we're on the other side now, but I actually saw you maybe like a week before you were about to head off. And leading up to it, actually, we'd met up regularly, and we're talking about like, okay, what's your game plan? Like, how's everything going? How are you feeling? And you're just like, you actually weren't sure. Yeah. Like, and that's it. Like, you sound confident now because it's like, yeah, no, I've done it. I've done it now. You're on the other side. You can reflect and you can be like, it was cool. But you know, when you are talking about the prep phases, a lot of it is also like, am I even ready? Oh, like that was a question that was coming out a lot. So that for you, like, what actually pushed you to make sure that you got to that starting line on that day that you had signed up for? It's like with any other races, like you can prepare as much as you want and as hard as you want, but those first, like, I would even say like the week out that we probably called up, you sit there and you're like, actually, am I ready for this? Have I prepared enough? But like, obviously you're not going to make any sort of gains within that week period that are going to change anything drastically for your race. So it came down to really getting I guess the run through and the logistics right. So when you do a race like a triathlon, obviously you've got your tri suit which sits under your swimsuit, and so you swim, and then you have to take your swimsuit off, and you have to put your biking shoes on, get your bike, and you have these things like your transition stations, which you can have a certain amount of food, your obviously extra pairs of socks, shoes, biking gloves, helmet, glasses, all that kind of stuff. So you come out, you get changed, and then you bike, and you come back, and then you get changed again at the same spot into your running gears. And all that kind of stuff. I'd never done a triathlon before in my life. And so I was sitting there, I was like, I actually have no idea. And when you're feeling like physically a little bit unprepared, because obviously like you're hypercritical of the situation. I wasn't, but I felt it. And you sit there and you're like, oh my gosh, nothing I can physically change now in terms of my fitness is possible. So I needed to iron out the transitions and exactly like what I was going to do. So I did a lot of research. I have a beautiful friend called Maggie who's like a professional at this. You've probably met her before. Actually. And so she gave me heaps of advice, and it was about calling with the other people, my other friends that were doing it as well, and kind of comparing what we've kind of got down. I got there a couple of days before, and it was really nice to actually spend a little bit of time in the environment where you're actually racing, so you kind of get a feel for the weather. You see other athletes as well. You talk about things. I think a big moment for me was when I was flying down to Taupo from Auckland, I sat next to this like 72-year-old man who'd just flown from Singapore to come and do the full Ironman.
Awesome.
And it was his 5th one.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there, I was like shivering out, and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Sarah, like I'm so nervous. This is my first half Ironman." He goes, "Oh, you'll be so fun. This is my 5th full one." And I was like, "Oh shit, okay." And he just gave me so many different tips, and he was like, at the end of the day, like, just have fun.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
And that was like a reoccurring message. And so I sat there and I was like, at the end of the day, I'm not racing to qualify for anything. I just want to get it done, and I want to say that I've done one. And when it came down to it, I was on the bike, and unfortunately the weather, it was like torrential rain, so it wasn't great mentally. But I sat there and I was like, you've just got to have fun. Come on, Ed, which was the guy's name. Ed told you just to have fun, so you just got to have fun. And I did. And it was actually really cool. And I guess that was kind of what I went through. You're unsure physically, but if you iron out the logistics, it's going to help with how you're feeling, and you, I guess, dig your teeth in a bit more into how the race actually looks before you get into it.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, preparation, like you can only prep so much, and then
100%.
Once you get there on the day, you just have to bring your A game, know that you've done the best that you can in the lead up, and then you will do the best that you can at the time. But then the difference between, so the stuff that you do versus like what we'd do, because we're done in like 40, 80 minutes, whereas you like have so much time to think as well. So what, I mean, besides singing songs in your head, that can only go for so long, but what are the types of things that are going through your head? So if you were to put on a scale of like the start to getting closer to the end, like what are the, if you were to draw the roller coaster and explain it as you're going, what is that?
Well, so the first barrier for me was that I had never open water swam in my life.
Whoa!
I know.
So your first one
I'm a pool swimmer. I've competitively swam, as a young girl in a pool. Yeah. And so my first open water swim was literally this race. Okay. And I have a fear. People laugh at me, but I have a fear of fish. Sure. Like the big ones that like swim at the bottom of the lake, Okay. And so I was like, oh my God, shit, what if I get eaten by like a trout or something like
Sorry,
that?
I shouldn't laugh.
I know, it's fair. But then I was like, okay, strategically I could put myself in the middle of the swimming pack, and so everyone else gets eaten, and then hopefully I'll get to the end. Yeah. But no, anyway, so I just needed to get through that, and I knew that the rest of the race was going to be fine because I could do all of these individual things by themselves. And so I was like, you know what, at the end of the day, even if I just bite it off one discipline at a time, like I'm going to be okay. I just need to get past that swim, and that was like the biggest thing for me. And I have really bad asthma. Sure. And I knew that it was going to be really cold, and cold water and asthma don't always mix well, which is what I was anticipating. So when I got in, I kind of panicked quite a lot, and it was literally within the first 100 meters, and like your asthma, like your chest just like folds. Like I couldn't breathe properly, and I was like, oh my God. And it was in a split second, I was like, okay, I can just give up now. I'm like 100 meters from the shoreline. I'll just turn around and like go back where I came from. But I sat there and I was like, no, Soph, because this is like a dream of yours. You're just got to get through this. And so what I did is I started doggy paddling. People think it's funny, but sometimes you just got to do these things. Doggy paddling became breaststroke, and then your body kind of acclimatizes to the actual swim, the water itself, and then slowly I began to swim. But what I was finding is the swimming that I was doing in the pool, which was what we call like every 3 strokes you breathe, wasn't really working because my chest and my asthma couldn't hold on to the air enough for long enough. And so I had to switch it to bilateral swimming, which is like every second stroke you breathe on that same side. And it was just like I just made it up on the spot, and it just worked. Yeah. And I just started like getting in my head, and like it was so funny because I just started imagining like the pool lines on the bottom. And it's cool because once you get into it, you start to find yourself like in a group of people too, and you know that it's okay, and you know there's other people probably experiencing the same things or similar things that you are, because none of us were professionals, that's for sure. And so once I got past that swim, and I remember running up out of it into the transition area, I was like, holy frick, like we just did that. Like if that's the only thing I take away from the race, it would be that I did my first open water swam, and it went like it was the fastest 1.9 kilometers I swam my whole training. Awesome. And so that was like the biggest thing ever. And then I moved into the bike, and obviously it's so funny. Races like this, just a bit of a tangent, can be quite intimidating because people do it with really expensive gear. Yeah, I remember. I bought my bike from Cash Converters, and I rode this race on a Cash Converters bike, and it was so obvious because my bike was like this little road bike that I just like. The newest things I put on it were like I rewrapped the handle rails to make it to black to make it look a little bit sleek. And my dad had helped me change my pedals from his old bike, and it was just like so funny because every single time I was getting past, it was like buy these super expensive, like the ones you can pick up with your single. Of course, yeah. But It worked. It was
Yeah.
pouring with rain. My bike worked really well. I didn't get any punctures. All these expensive bikes and stuff, a couple of them did get punctures. And it was honestly funny because on the way back, I started passing those expensive
Yeah.
bikes. It's about learning how to pace yourself. And so that was the biggest thing with the bike because it was like undulating. You had to make sure that you had enough in the tank the whole way
Yep.
through. One thing I didn't think I did well, retrospectively, not that you asked, but I'm going to tell you anyway, was I didn't fuel or hydrate enough because my bike, like I didn't have the expensive gear to have like the 2 litres
To
of
have
water at the
everything on
front
it. Yeah,
or like the food bag or whatever. I literally had some random bag that my mum's colleague had given me.
Yep.
That I was just like pulling this mashed up peanut butter and banana out of and just going for it. But like it worked. And when you pull in, it's really cool because you come back from that ride and you pull in and like half of Taupo's there watching
Yeah,
you
yeah,
and they're
yeah.
cheering for you and you're like, holy shit, I'm so close to the end.
Yeah.
And then you start the run. And the run, I made the mistake of, because I was so dehydrated and underfueled from the bike, because on the bike you're supposed to over prepare. I was under prepared.
Okay.
Because on the bike you're preparing for the run as well,
Of course,
nutritionally,
you
right?
got such a long period of
Yeah.
time to be able to get it in you.
And I didn't do that
Yeah.
well enough, which is fine because shit happens.
Did you get off your bike and do a vortex? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I tried to, right? But of course that comes right back up after
Yeah, yeah,
5
yeah.
more kilometers.
Yeah.
And so I tried to overcompensate on the run. And obviously projectile vomited a couple times, but it's part of it because
Yeah.
this shit happens. Like I wasn't the only one doing that, trust
Yeah.
me. And you went through the run, and the run was like the hardest thing mentally, like ever, because you sit there and you've just done 4.5 hours of exercise, and it's like pouring with rain, and then like the sun started coming up, but then it would pour again, and then you get thunder in the background, and you had lightning as well, and you're sitting there like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I could do this, you know.
Yeah.
And the track itself was like a 2 lap 10 point whatever kilometer
Sure.
lap, and like you would start and you'd run to one end of the lake, well, like part of the lakeside obviously, and then come back into the centre and run around, and there was all these people, which was really great, but then you went back out by yourself and it's just you and your thoughts,
Yeah.
which is just like next level. And that's when you really got to dig deep. And I just kept telling myself, come on, Soph, like we've done this before, and I was so stoked that I had run the Dunedin Marathon before that, because that's when I developed like the mental strength, I think, and discipline, and I realised that I'm actually capable of pushing through your physical barriers.
For
You know,
sure.
when you're getting tired and fatigued, you've just got to talk to yourself, and the way you talk to yourself changes everything. So yeah, it was just incredible. And when you finish and you cross that finish line, your body like obviously feels broken, but up here you're like, holy shit, I just did that. Like it's just crazy. I felt like I could have done another one after that, but I couldn't physically, but mentally I was ready to do another one.
Yeah.
But it was so cool. And again, like it's the community and it's the people that show up. Like literally, I'm pretty sure most of the township came, and people travelled internationally for this race. Like my bestie Ed.
Yeah, good old Ed.
Yeah, literally. And so part of that is just like the community, and it just gives you such a push.
Yeah.
And yeah, so many times during the run, that was like what I needed. And it was actually the first race that my family had come and watched.
Awesome.
And so it was really cool because my little brother was there. And he was filming. I could hear my dad talking to me as well when I'd run past him. And it was a point of pride, you know, like no one in my family does endurance races.
Yeah.
And my parents have never even shown interest in these kind of things. And so for them to be there and experience that with me was really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, even a couple of years before that, you hadn't as well.
Well,
Like,
yeah,
it wasn't
exactly,
a thing
right?
you ever considered to do. So.
And to say that I did it was fantastic. And yeah, to see out the year like that, it was, it was awesome.
I had a theory actually. I was thinking about this earlier So I think the first time I met you, you were doing law. So you did law, obviously.
Yeah.
You have 2 degrees.
Yes, I do.
Right, that's also cool. But a lot of the time we would talk, you were so... I feel like this stuff is really good for you because it takes you aside to, like, you're physically doing stuff where you can tick off, like, I have done this for myself.
Yeah.
And that was something that we were both working on at the same time. Like, well, what are we doing for ourselves?
Yeah.
Because we are the types of people, and that's probably why we have a podcast, to give.
Yeah,
Just
all
to
the
give to
time.
everyone
Sure.
as well. So that gives you a lot of time to, like, be proud of stuff that you have done for yourself.
Yeah.
But, you know, prior to this, you went into law, and I know some of the stuff that you were talking about in terms of aspirations was so selfless in a lot of the ways that you would, and I see it in what you're doing now. Like, a lot of what you do is so you can go through it so that someone else doesn't have to.
100%.
So is that, like, with the law stuff, I know a bit of it took a little bit of a hiatus, but the philosophy behind you going into law, is a lot of that kind of what drove you, sorry?
Yeah, 100%. Like it's just crazy. Like I'm so blessed to have an education, first of all, and let alone to have 2 degrees. But the thing that we I guess, my motivation for a lot of things in my life, like you say, is to do things for other people. Even doing that race, I was blessed to do it for myself, but it's also like I was a huge role model, I know, for like my siblings, and there were other people that wanted like advice on how to do this stuff afterwards, and it's fantastic to be able to help. And the same with law, like I love studying and I love doing law and stuff, but at the end of the day I want to help people with that education, and it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that we give a lot and we want to help other people, but it's really important to know the balance between where your help needs to end before it becomes detrimental to yourself. And it's funny when you're doing races and stuff like this, you think about all of these things, right? Like you understand, you think about the growth and everything you've ever experienced. Like, you know those movie montages where it's like the peak of like the climax of the movie? That's what's going on up here. You're like, oh my God, Sophie did this and you did this. You're so capable, and it's really cool. Because I think when you feel really good in yourself and in what you're doing, the way that you help other people changes as well, because you help from like a really strong point.
For sure. Yeah, and you actually know what feeling good feels like.
Oh, 100%.
Which, like, a lot of the time you're just giving because you think it feels good, but then you actually take yourself and do something that feels good, and you're like, oh, this is how it's meant to feel. So you like know what to then engage in, so 100%. That you're like bringing that back to yourself as well. Yeah, I feel you, because the whole, I know people say it all the time, but the empty cup analogy is actually so true. Literally. And it hurts the most when you know your cup is empty, because you're like, yep, that's right in the gut right there.
I saw another version of that analogy where it was like the little cup and then you have like a big jar, and say you're the big jar. The little cup might be the people that you surround yourself with, but if you're getting poured into by a little cup, you're hardly even being filled up.
True.
So it's about who you surround yourself as well as who fills your cup, as well as much as you fill your own or you fill other people's. It's fantastic. Yeah. But I agreed.
thinking about that, all of that stuff is it's so important, because right now, you know, we have the ability to access anyone that we want.
Yeah, sure.
So like we have to be very careful with who we engage with all of the time, like not just in person anymore, because like we used to just be able to leave a place and then you can leave everything at that place. Now it can all follow you. So this is where we're going to come back to, you know, you putting yourself out there and deciding, because I know for a while, like, you really just kept yourself to do your thing so that you could build, and now you've literally just gone the opposite direction and you've put it out for anyone. Now it's not just the people who follow you, it's for anyone who wants to hear about what you're doing. Your process for, you know, coming to terms with that.
It was scary because I have, I think we spoke about this before, I have Anchor, or I use Anchor for my podcast, and it's funny because it gives you like the analytics of, and particularly who your audience is. And when I saw that someone in Korea was listening to me or someone in the USA, I was like, these people don't know me, like, and I'm making this content, like they're listening to my voice, they're listening to what I have to say, and like we've had zero interactions, and they have access to my life through this, which is really, really scary. But I think sometimes it's like people that we don't even know that we help the most.
For sure.
Like I just remember we met at the gym, when I used to work there. That was probably the first time we interacted properly. I remember working at the gym, and I was a group fitness instructor there for about 4 years, and like one girl came up to me in my last class and she was like, thank you so much for teaching the way that you do and being so happy and positive and motivating, because it's changed the way that I perceive life and how I want to live, because every single class I came to, you were always so kind. And I had nothing to do with this girl before. And so she was a complete stranger to me. And so it just took me aback, because I think that was probably my first interaction with like the importance of being who you are because you never know, I guess, who's going to see you. And it's the same with the podcast. I'd rather, I would rather be myself and be a bit dorky, or just like keep it 100% real, because whoever's listening could benefit from that. And again, like we touched on earlier, if they don't like it, they don't have to listen. It is really scary though, because I predominantly have been like a small circle girl, or like a floater, but I'm very private. And so putting certain things out there, I was like, do I really want to do this? But then, you know, if you half-ass the like vulnerability, if you half-ass like being genuine, no one's going to vibe with that. So sometimes you just got to go 0 to 100, and people will appreciate it and people may not. It's funny because when I was like working last year, I had a lot of students or people that I would work with be like, oh, like I'm so worried about what other people are going to think about me, and it was fantastic, because it allowed me to formulate this idea that there are 50 people, like for every 50 people that love you and appreciate you and value you, there's always that one person that maybe doesn't, or like they might not even be rude about it, but like they might not vibe you. And for some reason we always focus on that one person.
Absolutely.
Regardless of the 50 people that are out there, we focus on that one person. And so it was every single time I ever doubted myself, or like I was like, oh, should I be doing this? I always sat there and I was like, it's that 50-1 ratio.
Yeah.
Like I got to focus on those 50 people, and I know I've got 50 people that like message me every single episode and sit there and they're like, you know, thank you so much for that, or send me cool things to talk about. Like it's like a cool tiny little community, but it's really cool because you know you're appreciated regardless. For sure. Yeah. And even it was weird, I was in town one night. I wasn't drunk. I'm not really a big drinker, but we were just out dancing and stuff, and some girls came up to me and they're like, oh my gosh, like, you did a podcast. And I was like, okay, first of all, Vault 21 is not the place to have this conversation. But it was blessed, and I was super grateful to actually hear that I helped or made them think about things, which is fantastic. Yeah. No,
that's the weirdest part. The weirdest part, like it's just something you never get used to. It's just people like messaging you from somewhere, or like coming up and seeing you. Like I've told it on here before, but I got blown out of a ruck like during a rugby game. Yeah. And a guy just like helped me out. He's like, sick podcast. And he just like took off, and I was like, whoa, okay, all right, bro. Like, I'm trying to stay in the moment here. But and something that you post all the time, and I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because when you were telling me that story just before about the girl who came up to you and told you that just being kind, like really just gave something for them, like that day, that week, or anything that drives them to try be like slightly better for themselves. What do you tell everyone to do, and why do you keep reminding us?
Literally, I don't know how many times a week I always put my little sunrise snap up with some different like Afrobeats music. Yeah. And I always have like a little message down the bottom saying, you know, tell someone that you love and appreciate them. And I think for me that kind of became a huge message when my granddad passed, because that was the first like passing that I can remember in my adult life. Like obviously you go to funerals as a kid, but like maybe you don't really understand what's going on.
Usually just running around outside.
Yeah, literally like throwing balls at each other. My granddad was like the first passing at the start of last year that I had experienced, and he actually passed while I was driving back down to go home. Right. So I was staying away with my friends for New Year's, and then I got the call that he was in hospital, and I was like, okay, like I'll come down. And then my mum called me an hour later, and she was like, look, like he's going to pass, you need to come home because we're going to take him off his life support and stuff. And he actually passed away like when I was like an hour out of home, and I hadn't talked to him or like told him that I obviously loved him for like a week, you know, because I was away with my friends and stuff, and that's fine. But like this man was like the reason I got into education in the first place. Like he used to pick me up from school from the age of like 5 onwards, and we would always sit there and he would have a different like encyclopedia chapter for me to read. And I used to read it, and then we would talk about it, and often it was about monkeys or turtles or really cool stuff like that. But like he taught me the power of education, so he had such a big part of my life that when I wasn't able to say bye, I was like, holy shit, I should have told him that I loved him more, that I appreciated him more. Like I wanted him to know how much he like changed my life, which was like and I didn't get to do that, and so it made me reflect, and I was like, holy frick, like we need to tell people around us that we love and appreciate them so much more, because like especially while we can, right? Because often we wait till something big happens, or maybe someone's passed. Unfortunately, I don't like saying that, but to be like, oh my gosh, I love this person so much, I appreciated them. But while that person is alive and around us and we have access to them, tell them all the time. Like it's free. Do you know what I mean? It's not costing us anything, and it can make people's days. It also can empower yourself as well, and changes your perspective. I always tell my friends, no matter who they are, that I love them. It's probably like the cringiest thing ever. I always like yell out, love you, bye, across the road, or like I'll send them random messages, and it's because these people have changed my life without often knowing that they've changed my life. And I think that's like the most important thing that you can do. And I've got a follower of the podcast actually, and he says the same thing on his like Instagram, and I think he really realized it because he had like a family member passing as well, and all I saw was, you know, like hug your family while you can, tell your family that you love them while you can, and like regardless of who your family is, and I think your family changes when you become an adult, you know, maybe it's your friends, like you need to tell people that you love and appreciate them while you can. And I think part of that is also being kind, because all of that stuff's free, right? It doesn't cost you anything to be a good person. So I always I'm a big advocate for that, because I think we wait till big occasions happen to tell someone that we appreciate them, or someone's done something for us to be like, oh, thank you. When actually, like, if you see someone and you're like, holy shit, thank you for making me laugh today. Like, I appreciate that, because I don't know.
No, itanima as well for the men as well. Always tell your boys you love them as well. There is nothing wrong. Like so if you go through all my texts with all my boys, we always say love you, or like XX at the end, or like can't wait to see you again. And it's the same thing. It's like, even if so after this, or like something that we do all the time is just like, just check in. You don't have to get into a huge discussion or anything. It's just a small little thing. But I think we put up these barriers that like maybe they don't want to hear from me, or what if they take it wrong? But like if you just put it out there, you always feel better for yourself as well.
For sure.
Like, I think maybe there's a bit of a barrier around people thinking that it's going to be taken the wrong way. Like, what if they think I'm weird? And it's like, no, man.
Or what if they think I'm hitting on them? Absolutely not.
Like, everyone will, and even if they don't, and this is another thing, is even if they don't take it then, and you just keep doing it, and they're like, okay, the day that they need it the most, when it comes through, like, it might just hit. That might be the day that you shifted a lot of cogs in their head for them to feel like, I do matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think some of the time, like, if you continue to live your life showing appreciation and love for people around you, it encourages them to do it as well.
Yes, yeah.
And so basically you can just create and normalize the idea of telling your boys that you love them, or telling your friends that you love them, or expressing appreciation. Which I think is like one of the most important things that we can do, especially moving forward the way like society's going and stuff too, and how people are feeling in themselves. To know that you're appreciated sometimes is like a good reason for people to stick around.
That's so cool. That is very, very cool. And I think, it's so small. I think with anything that we talk about, making behavioral change and everything, we always think of where we want to be. Like, we want to be happy. We want to be, like, we want everything to be perfect. But it all starts with like something tiny that's going to like start the cogs shifting in someone else's life, or your own life, hopefully your own life as well. That is so cool. So you're now taking all of this, so everything that you've learned, and you're going to continue to put out podcasts every week, but you have also decided that there is another journey awaiting you.
Yeah, so I recently as in like 3 months ago, decided I'm going to move to the other side of the world. So I just literally purchased a one-way ticket, and I'm originally flying to London, but I've got official employment in Scotland now.
So you did get it?
Just for 6 months, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, in like a refurbished castle, like it's so extra. That's way more than me, but and I just bought a one-way ticket. I honestly don't know when I'm coming back, but I'm packing all my stuff into, I think I've got a total of like 37 kgs of luggage.
Sheesh.
Yeah, and then moving over there. So kind of scary, and people it's amazing how people react to that decision, because some people are like super stoked for you, you know, like, and that's one thing. Like, you should be really aware of who's happy for you when you're really happy and supportive and stuff. But also other people are quite like critical or like slightly discouraging. I don't think they intend to be discouraging, but they'll sit there and they'll be like, you've got such stability in your job, why are you leaving? You're leaving to such uncertainty, etc., etc. Which I sit there and I'm like, I think this is them projecting. Yeah,
this is a projection of you.
This is, I think, because they probably wouldn't have the confidence to do it themselves. But I guess in all of this, and I think the podcast actually encourages, because you learn so much about yourself, and then you're like, I think I'm ready to leave this chapter and take my learnings and apply them somewhere else. And so this will be my 7th year in Dunedin if I chose to stay. But I've only got 2 more weeks here actually, and then I'm going to leave. And essentially my plan is to bartend for 6 months, and then after that I'm going to start my career. Cool. So I'm either I've got lots of different options, but I think it's actually easier to figure out what you're doing when you're over there. But at the moment, I could either start my master's, or I could do a similar job for a university over there that I'm doing this year, working in mental health support of residents and stuff, or try and join a law firm, because that's the easiest place in the world to translate my law degree to and practice over there, because we have like similar justice systems, legal systems, the structure's the same and stuff too. Sure.
And you've also done your profs as well, so that makes it easier for you to...
100%. So I could practice in New Zealand if I wanted to, which... Obviously I'm not, because I'm leaving. But worst case scenario, I've got 2 years to make something out of myself. If that doesn't work out, I'll come back and be a lawyer.
And that is the part that everyone forgets, right? Is that you can still, if it doesn't work, you can still come back.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I think that's why you get all the crazy looks from people like, but you've got the, and I'm like, what? You're still so young though. Like, honestly, you have time.
It's just amazing, like all like the buts that people give you, and you're like, if this is how you want to live your life, 100%. Keep going. Oh, but this, and make excuses for yourself. But I wanted something more for myself, and I think it was funny because we met up in Melbourne, right?
Yes.
And that was the day that I had this epiphany, because I realised that the world is so much bigger than New Zealand. Yeah. And I was like, holy shit, if this is what it's like in Australia, imagine what it's like over in the UK, where you're literally like in the centre of the world, essentially. Well, that's how I view it anyway. And so I was like, frick, I'm just gonna do it. You know, I'm just gonna go buy a one-way ticket. I've got 2 years. If that doesn't work out, I think, I said this before, I can come back and be a lawyer, but I also want to try Dubai. Yep. So if the UK doesn't work out, I might try Dubai for a little bit. And Then come back and be a lawyer. I just figure I consider desk for the rest of my life, and I'm old. Do you know what I mean? But I think when you're young and relatable and agile and able to do these things, right, you should go and travel and you should go and experience things. And the types of jobs that I want to do working with young people, particularly the 18 to like 22 year kind of group, I love working with them. They're so fun. I think when you're young as well, you're more relatable for them. And so the lessons and things that you go through with them, they appreciate more rather than like a 40-year-old person talking at them. You know how we talked about it earlier. And so I'm gonna try that, and we'll see how we go.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. I mean, I remember when you first told me, I was like, get it. Like,
I was just like,
heck yeah. I was so stoked for you. But it's like you said before, that you can come back. Another thing is like, you don't want that what if, like later down the line, you're like, I almost did this, and like I was going to, then I got this job, and then I started having family, blah 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 blah, and then like, because you never want to have any sort of resentment for any decision that you've ever made.
100%.
And then if you go and do it, and then you're just like, that wasn't for me, even after like 6 months, you're like, nah, I'll go back.
Yeah,
you've done it. You showed yourself what you liked, what you didn't like, and now you can see like, okay, that's kind of my jam. This is not. And
especially when you don't have any like dependents. Like I don't have kids. I don't have a partner. Like I can just like, for example, I'm living in Scotland, but if I want to go to Italy for the weekend, I can. Do you know what I mean? I don't have to consult with someone else or consider someone else, or worry about kids and stuff too. And I also found that like a lot of I love my mum, but I think my mum's going through a patch where she's kind of like, I wish I had done this, and hearing and seeing that, I was like, I don't want that for me, and so what I'm going to do is live it on behalf of my mum as well. Do you know what I mean? And so all of these little factors kind of like accumulated, and I was like, I'm just going to do it. And now's a better time than not. And I'm so grateful for the education that I have, because I do have a fallback position, right? I know a lot of people maybe don't, and so I admire them for going without a fallback position. That's really cool. But I just thought I wanted more for myself, and so we're going to try and get more.
And you could also become a touchstone for your family. Like, if they haven't gone before, they now have someone that they know has done it, or they know is still there, and they can just come to you, and now you've all experienced it.
100%. Even like one of the girls at F45, she told me, actually literally today, that she's moving to Manchester.
Nice.
And so I just like sent her all the info about my visa. I was like, I did this, I wish I knew this. And so it's actually really cool, because the way that you live your life helps other people, I guess, to come back to at the end of the day.
And everything that like you can just open it. I always talk about perspectives, and like how much more of a perspective you can give someone else, but also how much 100%. Of a perspective that person can give you. And I think that's why when you do anything that we share, it sounds crazy to us, like we're just like, this is so obvious, like shouldn't people know this? But some people are hearing that for the very first time. And it blows their mind.
It amazes me, like some of the messages I get, I'm like, whoa, you didn't know that?
It's hard.
but it's like
I know exactly what you mean.
Not being like weird about it, or like, I'm better than you. It's kind of just like the way that we live our lives. I think between both of us, we'll probably experience a hell of a lot.
For sure.
And so the way that our lives have kind of unfolded and what we've learnt is not always how other people's lives go. And I think we need to check ourselves sometimes and make sure that we are just keeping it humble and making sure that we communicate for everyone, not just for people who think we're on our level, or not on our level, but like live the same lives as us. And
then just thinking about, the title of your podcast, Chapter 24, did you, so when writers would put, look at me being poetic, but when writers would put something together and they have chapters, like they are stages of a book which tell an overall story, did you also, prior to this, prior to you turning 24, you would have reflected on 23, and then did you have like chapter 24 will look like this?
I had an idea, and honestly I had like a plan, and I thought it was going to go to plan, but then I like speaking on things that are fresh, because when they're fresh or like they've just happened, they're much more like, you speak with a different level of passion.
Absolutely.
Like it's really cool to talk about, like I really want to talk about Melbourne and like our catch up over there and what Melbourne taught me, but like it's not something that I'm super passionate about right now. Like what I want to talk about right now, especially for this like next episode, is actually the 3 basic psychological needs that humans have, like the competency, relatedness and autonomy, because I feel like I've had a lot of interactions with people this week particularly where I can see that that's something that they need to satisfy in order to like make their life feel a bit more fulfilling. And so because I've had multiple interactions, I'm kind of like, maybe this is like a sign, or maybe the universe is telling me that I need to write this episode this week. So I kind of just do it off that, but like I do have a bank of topics and like planned out podcasts and stuff that I would episode, sorry, that I will publish, but
Yeah.
like I like to talk about things that are fresh. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's all very well to have like a plan, and in theory that plan works, but then when you put human interaction with it,
Yep.
it's like anything, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't always go to plan.
Of course, we're all dynamic, and like
Yeah,
also,
for sure.
where you are on that day, like the amount of times I've had something that I was meant to talk about, and then something, just the slightest thing, takes me off track, and I'm like, blah, 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 and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh well, here we go.
Yeah. This is obviously what it was supposed to turn to. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then what about, so now that you're going to go over,
Yeah.
and literally going over very, very shortly,
Yeah.
the feelings that are going on for you, like, is it more excitement than it is daunting? Is it more daunting than exciting? Are you just
Yeah.
like indifferent? You're like, just get me on that plane?
I am so excited,
Yes.
like majority excited.
Yeah.
I think because it's something different, and I think over the years, everything that's happened, you develop a sense of confidence, and you back yourself.
Yeah.
And so I know that I'm going into uncertainty, but because I back myself, I know I'm going to be okay,
Mm.
which is a position that I'm really grateful to be in, because I never used to be like this. I
Sure.
used to really struggle with my self-esteem and,
Mm.
like what I thought I was doing with my life. But now to be able to say that I back myself is like such a big thing. I am nervous, I think, long term. So 6 months is a great period of time to bartend, to meet people, to connect and all that kind of stuff. But then after that, I'm kind of like, holy shit, like the world's my oyster, which is great. I'm really grateful. But you're quite nervous because I'm worried I'm going to like open the wrong door or pick
Sure.
the wrong door and then close other ones that I should have tried. But at the end of the day, it all works out how it's supposed to. I also am like terrible at saying goodbyes.
Right.
Like, and I hate goodbyes, and so I'm just like avoiding all of them.
Yeah.
Just especially because it's like a one-way ticket, right? Like I don't know when I'm going to see these people next, but we're very grateful or very lucky to have technology, right? Because I
Yeah.
could connect with anyone, like
Absolutely.
you say, at any point in time, which is cool. But also, yeah, I'm going to miss my family a lot. I'm going to miss. I think there's maybe I think I'm leaving Dunedin with like 10 people that I'll really
Yeah.
keep in touch with across the whole, like, in my life. Like I've got a very small circle, and like I said, I'm a very private person. But yeah, like I know we're gonna be okay, and I know this friendship's gonna last, and these
Yeah.
are quality people, and it's gonna be completely different. I just know it's gonna be a bit of a social shock as well. I think where I'm going, I might be like one of like 3 brown people
Sure.
as well,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
will
yeah.
be interesting.
Yeah.
But like it's part of the journey, trying to figure it all out. But I think more excited, but obviously like nervous for a little bit of things, which are further down the line, but also kind of conflicting with like the sad feelings because I'm not really a sad person.
Yeah.
So knowing that I'm going to be sad kind of scares me a little bit, but
Yeah.
that's all right. Goodbyes are like, it's never a goodbye. It's like I'll see you soon.
Of course.
Without sounding
Yeah.
cheesy.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. Yeah.
No, I just don't. I usually if I know I'm not going to see anyone for a while, and like I've still got a bit of time wherever I am, I'll just say, oh yeah, we'll catch up soon, and I'll just leave, and I'm like that doesn't
Never
happen.
catch
I
up.
just go,
Sure.
and I'm like I couldn't have done it. I would have been there for 3 hours trying to hang out, and
Yeah.
then you just like get too overwhelmed with it. But
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, you can talk to anyone over that time. But also, I feel like it's also a good time, and I'm not saying that you have shite people in your life, but you're now so disconnected from
Yeah.
all of that. Like you can
Yeah.
leave a lot behind as well. Yeah.
Which is kind of scary, because I was thinking about the other day, like if I wanted to, I can like rewrite exactly who I am when I go over there. No one knows me from a bar of soap. All they see is like my socials, right?
Yeah.
And I could just like completely change my aesthetic. I could change everything about myself.
You can, yeah.
And it's fantastic. But I think, like I said, I back myself, and I actually kind of like who I am.
For sure.
And so I'm excited to put this version of Soph to the test over there, and meet new people, make new friends, and try and figure out if all the lessons and like your social awareness here applies over there as well. Because I'd like to think that I read people quite easily and get a good feel for them. And so it'll be interesting to see if I'm still as accurate over there
Sure.
as I was here, which is cool. I'm open to the discovery and like the lesson, I guess. But yeah.
I'm just like, cultures are just so interesting as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea what to expect over there. I think it's just like so. London in particular, I'm going to spend a bit of time in London before I move, but London in particular is so diverse. Like their immigration, like aspect of society is huge, and so there are people from literally everywhere that are coming to London again because it's so central. Scotland, particularly where I'm going, not so much. I think it's like a township of like 4,000 people, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's like the smallest place I've ever lived in.
Yeah.
But I'm also quite excited because I think a lot of people go traveling, specifically the time of year that I'm going. And so I'm hoping that along the way you'll meet people like in backpackers or people who come and stay at the hotel I'm going to work at, et cetera, et cetera. And so you've got to take advantage of the opportunities that present itself and not kind of shy away from them, I guess.
For sure, yeah. And something else that I'll just bring up quickly, is, you know, you became a huge role model for a lot of, I'd say at least the women in the places that you would work, because they see you as someone that they can aspire to try and be like. But on top of that, you know, you probably became the biggest role model to two little people. Not children, siblings. Siblings as well. So for their growth and for everything, like, what are has there been a huge conversation? Because I know that that was a huge part of why you did a lot of what you did, was to make sure that they were set up as well. So for you, like that, I'm not saying don't get sad and stuff, but for you setting them up for for you leaving.
So my siblings literally mean everything to me. I know sometimes we argue and obviously typical sibling things, but I think I pride myself in the fact I want to be a role model for them in particular. If I could be a role model for anyone in the world, it would be for them. And I kind of want to pave a way, I guess, that they could also follow or learn these lessons so I can pass on this knowledge. I think part of the way that my siblings and I work also is that we come from, we're half Sri Lankan and half Kiwi, because my dad's from New Zealand, mum's from Sri Lanka. But our second cousins and stuff over there, don't have access to a lot of education. They don't have access to typically, and this is a very conservative way of looking at females, but the way that the Sri Lankan culture sometimes plays out is that some females won't have access to cars, for example, and won't ever be allowed to go to school or get an education. And we come from quite a conservative Sri Lankan culture, I guess. And so the way that we live our lives here, my siblings and I, is we're so grateful to have access to education and to be able to have these opportunities that maybe our extended family won't have. And so that's also part of the motivation, showing people, and if not our family, that there's more out there for us. Particularly having a younger sister as well. She's 21. She's really in that kind of phase in her life where she's figuring out who she is, what she wants to do, who she wants to be. I just want to teach her at the end of the day to be a kind person and to actually try different things, and actually just sometimes you got to take a gamble on yourself and just absolutely wing it, which I guess to a certain extent is what I'm kind of doing. And but I know it's going to turn out okay, and so I want her to be able to tell that to herself when the time comes as well. But also my siblings have taught me so much about myself. It's crazy. For some reason, we always think a lot of people in past positions that I've been in think that the people you look after will never give you anything back, you'll never learn anything from the people that you're in charge of. When in actual fact, I think the people you are in charge of teach you the most about yourself, because you're forced to, like I said, reflect on yourself, have those conversations with them that actually subconsciously allow us to understand where we're kind of at with ourselves. And I just remember having conversations with some of the students that I looked after, and I was like, you have taught me so much, and it's nothing I never expected going into these roles to learn stuff from the people that I was to take care of. But it just happens, and then you sit there and you're like, holy shit, these people have changed my life, and I was in charge of them, you know. And it's the same with having siblings. My siblings teach me so much, even though I'm the eldest.
And it's having the humility to know that they're the ones who taught you that, and then just being. And I also, I think what comes back to what you do is reminding people, but also letting people know what they've taught you. I think that's something huge. I used to go back and tell a lot of my teachers this is the one thing, and then even if they don't think anything of it, they're like, oh yeah, kind of cool. But someone might have been the one thing that they were so nervous about, and if they feel that they were able to relay that on to someone else, then they'd be like, oh yes, it worked. No, I'm a big advocate for that as well. I also like appreciating people for their time. Just even sending a message after thank you for time, because time is I think the most important or the most blessed gift that anyone could ever give you, because they could do anything with their time. They could go to the gym, they could go for a walk, they could hang out with other people, but they're choosing to dedicate that period of time to you, and that's the best gift, I think. Grateful for all these little things, and I think at the end of the day it always comes down to expressing appreciation and gratitude and stuff. So. And keeping that within you as well. It's, if you don't take that time to go and see what you are grateful for, it's easy to be the world hates me.
100%. You feel like everything's up against you,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, no, I think when you express gratitude, like out and appreciation outwards and often, you start to realize actually your life's actually kind of okay, if not great.
Yeah.
But I also think, and I'm also a big advocate for, like, whatever appreciation and gratitude we express outwardly, we have to be prepared to express the same inwardly for ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to express it outwardly, and that's great. But as long as you can like measure that equally or reciprocate that to yourself,
Yeah.
I think that's like the best thing you can do.
I think that is the most powerful thing you have said today.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, I'm not saying that little thing, but it's like, it's so true. Because I think I framed this whole thing as like us giving, and then you just like hammered the reminder that like actually
It's important.
we also need to do it for ourselves as
yeah.
well.
Otherwise, it's so easy to lose yourself for the purpose of other people.
Yeah, and if we're expecting other people to be the ones to express it outwardly and we never get it, then we're not ever going to be okay, because we're like, I need it. Whereas we need to be able to do it to ourselves as well.
100%.
Nice. Very cool. This question that I ask everyone on this podcast is, what is something you do every day or close to every day that makes you feel like you have optimized the day?
I don't know if this will fit into that question. I journal. Like, it's like a religious thing, 5 minutes before bed. And I've talked about it in one of my podcasts, actually. I have like this journaling structure. It's called the 3x3.
Yep.
And I figured I actually created that a couple of years ago, and I've shared it with lots of students, and they love it as well. Basically, the first kind of set of 3 bullet points, and I bullet point because I cannot write. I am the most impatient person. I just get bored writing screeds, or like just doesn't interest me, and so I just bullet point like singular words, or even like a couple like a sentence, for example. The first 3 points are grateful, so what I'm grateful for during the day, something that I reflect on that really changed my day, made me happy, or something that I'm excited about. Then the next set are 3 things that maybe I was scared or nervous or fearful about during the day, which allows me to, I've acknowledged the good, I'm acknowledging the not so good from the day. And then the third set is like an action plan, or things that I'm going to do for myself the next day, or things that I'm going to tell myself in that moment that are going to address the fears and anxieties of the stress of that day.
Right.
Yeah, so sometimes, for example, I might be a little bit nervous about, maybe like I had a weird interaction with one of my friends. I'm nervous about that friendship. What I'll do is I'll check in with them tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? It's a good way to, I guess, manage the fear and anxieties. And because I do it so regularly, it like helps me to understand my days. Like they're not just going by anymore. I remember certain parts of my days, which allows me to connect a bit more with my life, which is really cool. I also have just kind of introduced, like, I'm a words of affirmation girl. That's like my primary love language. And so I write to myself like third person. And I think what it fulfills, it feels like this little, I don't know, little hole inside of me. The words that I wish I'd heard, hear often from other people, or as a kid. Like I always say, "Oh, Jay, Soph, I'm so proud of you for today. You know, this was really good." And I pick something out that I'm really proud or grateful for that I did in that day. Of myself, and then I do like my little affirmations, and then like, okay, on to tomorrow.
Nice. And I think the addressing the anxiety part, like, what are you anxious about for tomorrow? That's so good to put out there, because then you're not hiding it. You're not saying that like, nah, I don't have to feel that way, but you've addressed it. You're like, it's there. I know it's going to be there, so that nothing blindsides you the next day. I think like there's this big thing at the moment about like when you journal, like it's like a trend thing, like you just gratitude journal, you say what you're grateful for, which is fantastic. But I think if we like, you can't just take a whole lot of gratitude and like put it on top of like the fears and like kind of mush it in. It's like putting like a band-aid on. There's that meme where it's like the concrete and it's like split and they've got like a band-aid over the top. You know what I mean? Because eventually your fears and anxieties like do compound, and then sometimes it's like too hard to deal with and you don't know where to start. And so by acknowledging them every day, no matter how big they are, but the fact that you're acknowledging them on a regular basis will helps us to acknowledge that they're there, and then followed that up by the productive, action plan of that journaling style. You kind of learn how to process and productively address them rather than just like addressing them and letting them sit. So you've acknowledged the good, that's what I like about it. You've acknowledged the not so great, and then you've productively addressed how you're going to cope with this. And it doesn't have to be like a huge life-changing plan. Like,
what
am I going to do tomorrow? I'm going to move. No, just
literally.
Move countries.
I'm catching the flight. I think that's probably the thing that I do to optimize my day. And it's not big at all. It takes me like literally 2 minutes, because like I said, I'm super impatient, so I don't have a lot of time. / it doesn't interest me to spend a lot of time doing this. But it's like a little check-in with myself, and I think I have learnt that I live my life the best way when I am connected with myself before I connect with other people. And so it's a nice way just to check in with myself, see how I'm going, because you and I both have jobs that are like lots of people rely on us all the time, and it can be quite exhausting because you don't want to live your life for other people. So you always need to check in with yourself to make sure that what you're doing suits you and how you're living is actually okay for you.
That's cool.
Before other people. Yeah.
That is very, very cool. And then it gives you something to look back on.
Yeah, 100%.
You can always go back like, remember that time?
It's crazy. And that's the other thing, right? Like when I first started this journaling type, oh my gosh, it was like the end of the world. And then now it's funny because I was like, at that point, I was going through quite a bit, and I was like grateful for like really big things. And then now, like some days I'll just be grateful for like the roof over my head, and that's more than enough. And when you're grateful for the little things, everything else is just like amazing, like a bonus.
For sure. I remember, so we'll bring it back to someone you've actually, Tiana Hotham.
Oh my god, she's like my idol.
I interviewed her, and we were doing this at the end as well. She was talking about like things she's grateful for.
Sure.
And totally changed my perspective on gratitude. She was just like, I'm grateful for this cup of tea. And I was like, that's so true.
Yeah.
I was always like looking for the biggest things to be grateful for.
Yeah.
Like, I'm grateful for, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Then she just like named really 3 things so quickly. And I was like, shit, okay, that is so true.
Yeah, no, you have to be grateful for the little things, I think.
This has been amazing.
No,
thank you so much. That time flew like ridiculously.
It always does though. We always go on
time.
even with our catch-ups, hey.
And you were on time this time, so.
I know. I was so stoked with stuff, like walking down the hill. I was like, yeah, look at me go.
But I'm very excited for everything that's to come.
Thank you.
Chapter 24, it's on Spotify.
Yeah, at the moment, I'm working on it. But like I said, technologically challenged.
Yes,
so
yes. We'll get that out to everyone, and we'll make sure everyone can see that sort of stuff. And in that way, we get to keep up with you. Like, there'll probably be a bit of a time where you're getting into life and whatnot, but then we can actually see, whether we want to hear you tell us stories, or I won't tell people to come message you because that's your private time for yourself. But it's been amazing. I have been wanting to interview like since forever, and I'm so glad we finally had the time to be able to do it.
Grateful to be here. This is another thing. There we go. This will be me tonight. I know, literally, I'm grateful that I'm on the Sick Ass podcast, and I'm grateful for Troy.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
No, that's all right.
Cheers.
Thank you.